She was launched as the last word in liners and became the first word in cruising. She was designed to speed the journey by sea to Australia. She was once nearly sent to the scrapyard. She is the ship that has captured the affections of thousands of British holidaymakers. She is a ship which went to war. She is Canberra, a legend of the seas.
All pre-departure safety checks have now been completed, and Canberra is about to sail for Vigo.
Canberra weighs anchor in the Aegean Sea. She is on her way home to Southampton at the end of a Mediterranean cruise. On the bridge, the captain gives the intricate commands that will maneuver a ship of almost 45,000 tons out of a busy port.
Dead slow ahead, sir. Dead slow ahead, sir.
It is one of those moments when eye, hand, and experience are still irreplaceable.
Yeah, okay, just keep building up. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, now. Bring up engine, sir.
Full speed ahead, and Canberra adds one more sailing to a history which goes back to 1960. She was built in Belfast by Harland and Wolff for £17 million. P&O's requirements were for a liner bigger and faster than any they had owned before. She would deliver mail to Australia, a contract the company had held for more than 100 years, and ply new routes in the Pacific. On March the 16th, 1960, she was launched by Dame Patty Menzies, wife of the Australian Prime Minister.
I named this ship Canberra. May God protect her and all who sail in her.
The following summer, her maiden voyage took her to Sydney.
Meanwhile, only an hour or so away, the majestic Canberra was steaming in towards the heads, ready to enter the port of Sydney for the first time. The 27-knot liner has 14 decks, and all the superstructures above the main steel hull are constructed of aluminium to save weight. Her tremendous above-the-water height seemed to dwarf tall buildings as she came into her berth. Canberra will cut the passage time between Britain and Australia from 4 to 3 weeks. She's also been planned for the American tourist market.
Canberra's design with her side-by-side funnels and aft-mounted engines was unprecedented. No matter that she was the flagship of a fleet with one of the oldest traditions in merchant shipping. In those early days, she had 2 classes. Many of her tourist-class passengers were emigrants on their way to make new lives in Australia and New Zealand. It was the end of those 10-pound assisted passages and the coming of the jumbo jet, which scuppered the future of the long-distance liner. In 1972, Canberra became a full-time cruise ship, but she was still threatened with the breaker's yard. In the event, it was the division between the classes which went, and Canberra survived, waltzing classless into a new era of cruising. That was her triumph. Her glory came 10 years later in the Falklands.
There are 423 civilians aboard Canberra, all of them P&O employees, and all volunteers to go south with the Canberra. On the bridge, it's P&O navigating officers who are in charge, albeit acting under naval direction and working alongside naval personnel. The relationship between the crew and the troops is good. To the soldiers, the civilians bring an air of normality in what for many of them is an unreal situation. Maurice Rudderham, the purser, has seen it all before. He used to be in troop ships up until 20 years ago.
There is plenty of room for them to spread out, which obviously is making a great difference to them, rather than being cooped up in the old troop deck conditions of years gone by.
For the P&O crew, it's a cruise with a difference. After all, it's not very often a passenger comes in for a bar of chocolate with a rifle under his arm. Jeremy Hands, British Television News, aboard the Canberra.
The voyage to the South Atlantic was Canberra's phony war. The real thing came in San Carlos Bay, Bomb Alley. Canberra, though lightly armed, was terribly vulnerable. She was dubbed the Great White Whale. Unharmed but battle-stained, Canberra came home to Southampton a hero.
I can honestly say I've seen my company grow up. They've had their baptism of fire, and we took out boys, we brought back men.
Another historic occasion at which Canberra was at the centre, at Spithead in 1994, in the Queen's Review of the Fleet during the ceremonies to commemorate the 50th anniversary of D-Day, Canberra provided a grandstand for Normandy veterans.
Canberra is a unique ship. She is traditional in many ways, whereas a modern ship is very much a case of they build a hotel and put a ship around it, whereas Canberra was built as a ship and the hotel was put in it.
This film will take you into the ship and through the hotel, behind doors never normally open to the public. A cruise begins long before the passengers ever set foot on the ship. We are on the quayside at Southampton. Canberra arrived at dawn. She sails tonight at 7. In the space of a few hours, 1,650 passengers will be disembarked and 1,650 new ones checked in. The ship will be refueled and restocked with up to 140 tons of stores. This morning, that includes 10 tons of potatoes and 3 tons of eggs. Nearly all Canberra's supplies are bought in Britain. Before the efficiency of the docks improved, only half the amount taken on board today could be loaded. The rest was put into lorries, which then chased Canberra around ports all over Europe. On board, new carpets are laid. This is either to replace ones that have been damaged or as part of the continuous process of refurbishment to keep all the soft furnishings renewed and the cabins up to date with the designer's current scheme for their decor. The beer comes on board. In a 2-week cruise, 29,500 glasses will be served. The stewards put the final touches to the cabins. Soon the new passengers will be aboard. Canberra has 6 pianos. Each is retuned after every cruise.
Thank you.
The passengers are checking in. The Canberra experience starts here. That is, as soon as the Steinway's on song. Luggage is delivered to cabins and passengers to the ship, their own private world for the duration of their cruise. As Canberra leaves Southampton, the extraordinary community which inhabits a great ship sets to work once more to create what will be for many on board quite literally the time of their lives. Early morning tea and World Service News.
5 hours Greenwich Mean Time. BBC World Service.
The galley has broken into those 3 tons of eggs. Breakfast is one of their busiest times. While the bacon and tomatoes sizzle down below, the ship's senior officers meet at the captain's conference.
It probably isn't, but we better make sure.
These are Canberra's heads of department. Every morning they meet here in the captain's office.
To confirm that we've received this.
Breakfast, meanwhile, is in full swing.
We cannot have shore excursions ending at the same time as we are due to leave the port.
Play went quite well last night, although I'm pleased that we've got cloud covering this afternoon, because I think the passengers are actually exhausted with this really hot weather. Apparently it was 105 yesterday, so they're fairly tired. But, you know, the complaints it's too hot.
On Saturday the 28th, at approximately 1600, if it can be fitted in, to do a fire drill involving the attack and backup around the crew swimming pool for 30 minutes.
We have approval for the second security officer,
Yes,
from Bill Smith, providing we can find him accommodation. Of course, that could be the problem, but we're working on that.
And then it should clear again for tomorrow. And it looks as though it may be okay, clear skies, wind very similar to the present situation, calm, lovely cruising weather.
A cruise ship is a mobile island, a mini-state where the president is the captain. What are his responsibilities? Rory Smith.
Well, the primary responsibility of the captain, and this supersedes everything else, is the safety of the ship and everyone on board her. And there are no other areas that will impinge on that. That is the primary function of the captain. Outside of that, he is also what can best be described as a general manager. The legal powers that a captain has are quite clearly defined, but they are centered on this overriding necessity again for the safety of the ship and for the safety of everyone on board. If a particular incident occurred where, through the actions of a passenger or a member of the crew, the safety of the ship and those on board her were impinged in any way, then he can invoke those powers to ensure that the ship remains safe.
You could lock him up.
Yes, you could lock him up. You do whatever is necessary to ensure the safety of everyone on board.
How much of the captain's job is being a seaman?
You're always a seaman. 24 hours a day, you are always concerned with where the ship is, the weather you're liable to experience, how this will affect the passengers, how this will affect the crews as a whole, the conduct of your own ship and the other ships in the area, and the safety of the ship that you are in command of. Passengers, as part of their cruise experience, want to be able to go home and say that they have talked to and they have met the captain. To this end, I try to get around the ship at least 5 times a day, because it is important that A, we are seen, and B, that we actually talk to the passengers and find out how they feel about their cruise and what they're doing.
Safety is not only a preoccupation of the captain. Every week, every member of the crew, stewards, cooks, nurses, seamen, practice their lifeboat drills. Once a month, they take to the boats. The greatest threat to any ship's safety is fire. How are the risks minimized? The man whose responsibility that is, Chief Officer Peter Crump.
On the ship, we have the ship's fire detection systems, the fire patrol, a continuous fire patrol around the ship looking for fire and sources of fire. We have the crew training in reporting fires very early on, the training of the officers and the petty officers in firefighting, and the modern, well-trained, well-maintained firefighting equipment throughout the ship.
And passenger lifeboat drills, are they just a ritual?
The lifeboat drills are most important, and far more than just showing a passenger how to abandon ship. When we get our passengers mustered, the drill enables us to tell them where they've got to be and what they have to do in cases of emergency. And also, it enables us to tell them the different safety factors which are most important aboard ship.
Does Canberra's age make her any more or less safe?
All our safety and navigational equipment is updated as much on Canberra as it would be on a newer ship. The ship is a training ground for our junior officers, and like any training establishment, professional standards are very high and have to be so that we get our officers trained correctly. Canberra was built in the pre-computer era, in a belt and braces way, if you like, with a very strong hull, for instance. It's very heavy and very seaworthy. That makes for a much better motion, for instance, during our world cruises when we're subject to the major oceans of the world. We get a more comfortable ride, which makes it easier for the passenger to enjoy his or herself and easier for the crew to work.
Canberra has 2 sets of stabilizers. How effective are they? Chief Engineer John Englefield.
They will reduce a 29-degree roll down to 7 degrees. Fortunately, we don't get into that sort of sea very often, and so we only normally use 1 set of stabilizers at any time. This keeps the ship, as you will well notice, rock steady. They're about 14 feet long and about 8 foot across and stick out of the ship like an aeroplane wing. And as the ship rolls, one tips one way and one tips the other, to create forces that bring the ship back upright again.
A ship the size of Canberra generates an enormous quantity of waste. These days, it's scrupulously managed. Aluminium cans, for example, are separated, compressed into shiny cubes, and stored on board until they can be recycled. Peter Crump again.
The days of throwing garbage over the side are long gone. Today we have a very positive approach to the environmental problems of the world, and we have a comprehensive waste management system on board. We generate approximately 18 cubic meters of dry waste every day. This goes down to our waste management center, where it's sorted and baled and then stored for disposal ashore.
Of course, as the chief engineer explains, the ship's waste is not confined to garbage.
We have about 5.5 tons of food and solid waste. We have somewhere around about 300 tons of sewage waste. And we have about 120 tons of bilge water that we have to separate and sort out. All the bilge water is passed through separators until it goes out as it came in other words, like seawater. The sewage waste is treated in a treatment farm, and because of a natural action with sewage, that breaks down into pure water, and that's automatically discharged as well. The food waste is put through pulpers, just a little bit bigger than the sort of things you fit in your sink at home.
All the bread is baked on board. 7 tons of flour are used in a 2-week cruise to make something like 6,000 loaves and 91,000 bread rolls. There's a butcher's shop. 11 tons of meat and 6 tons of poultry and game are consumed in an average fortnight. Meat is one of the commodities always bought in Britain, both for the cuts and for the consistency of quality.
Please be seated for this morning's lesson, which is read by Hughie Taylor, the cruise director.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The lesson this morning is taken from the Gospel according to St. John, chapter 15, verses...
Apart from reading the lesson on Sunday in the Stadium Theatre, What else does the cruise director do?
The cruise director is responsible for the smooth running of the entertainments program, which includes every side of the entertainment, whether it be the shows, the daytime activities such as the sporting events, the lecturers, everything and anything to do with the entertainment I'm responsible for. My day is certainly a long day. We'll start every day at sea with a big school, we call it, which is Captain's Conference, and we will discuss how the cruise is going. Then I will go down and speak to my deputy and find out how the team are and if we have any problems. And the mornings will probably be just wandering around the deck and having a chat with passengers to see how they're enjoying it, to get feedback on the actual cruise. Lunchtimes, maybe rehearsal for the shows, afternoon sport, late afternoon bingo, early evening, probably a cocktail party to go to, then in the evening itself, a couple of shows, or comparing.
Have you put any of your money on your mum?
I don't have any money.
Oh, what a sad tale that is. But perhaps...
The main thing that we offer on board the Canberra is variety and choice. You can do as much or as little. We have some passengers that come on board and all they want to do is relax. They don't particularly want entertainment 24 hours a day. They may come on and just read books in corners, just have a nice quiet holiday. I am expected to be available to passengers 24 hours a day, probably to be a good ear, to be able to listen, to talk. You have to be able to cater for every age group on this ship, and I think that's one of the specialities of the Canberra. Whether it be for the young, it's certainly a family cruise, but also it's a cruise for people who are travelling by themselves. Nowadays, safety is unfortunately a major aspect. People are worried about going abroad, people are worried about going out of their houses at home. When they come on the ship, you can guarantee safety, and that is a great incentive for older people to come on. But youngsters, the best family ship in the world. You could not do this job if you didn't enjoy everything about it. The greatest satisfaction I get, though, is when you do have passengers come up to you and say, "We'll look forward to seeing you again next year."
The entertainment program is published daily in the ship's newspaper, produced along with menus and race cards in Canberra's print shop. Here's something you're unlikely to find in a newer ship, a full-time carpenter's shop. There's not so much timber in ships these days. It's a scene which goes back to the days of sail. Wherever possible, repairs are done at sea. There simply wouldn't be time in port. On deck, as passengers work on their suntans, Canberra gets some cosmetic treatment too. The laundry is another part of the ship affected by today's environmental concerns. To avoid any chance of pollution, it can't be used in port. Often the laundry works round the clock, ironing by day and washing by night. Hardly surprising when in each cabin there are 6 items of laundry per passenger, let alone all the table linen and clothes. If the ship has a hub, it's the purser's office, bank, information centre, sorter out of problems. On this cruise, the purser is Judith Smythe.
Well, the purser's job really equates to a general manager of a hotel ashore. It covers all the hotel-type areas. That's from the accommodation to the restaurants, the galley, the storerooms, all those areas, plus the front desk, and we're, of course, responsible for all the documentation that's necessary to get us in and out of ports around the world.
Good morning, all.
What are the commonest problems passengers bring them?
Cabins, I think, mainly. There's quite often problems with people sharing cabins. They don't get on with their companions, or there's a creak that they're not used to. They may be coming from a very quiet place at home and they're not used to all the ship's noises that there are. That's the main one. Sometimes things like table seating, but we can generally resolve that. But not always. Long ago, when we were going through the Red Sea, and a little old lady came up to me, I was at the desk in those days, and she said to me in all seriousness, "Can you tell me, where did the Red Sea part for Moses?"
What is it, in Judith Smythe's opinion, that makes Canberra so special?
It's always been known as a very happy and friendly ship, and I think the staff stay here for a number of years. We've got regular staff, and we have regular passengers as well, so they build up a rapport between them. And also it's a well-known and happy family ship. We have the children who've been coming for years, and in fact the nursery staff now know what were their charges, are now adult and have children themselves. So there's a certain continuity about it that goes on.
Andrew Terry is the embodiment of that continuity. He was born on Canberra. Sister Alison Ross, the ship's dispenser, attended his birth. Now 12, Andrew has cruised on Canberra every year of his life.
Thank you. Good. So you'll be coming again next year? Yep. Good lad.
Derek Gowland is Canberra's medical officer. What's the difference between being a doctor on land and a doctor at sea?
Sure, you have all the backup facilities of a local hospital, which we often don't have at sea. So you've got to be a little bit of a jack of all trades, a Swiss penknife, really. You've got to do a little bit of everything, including your basic general practice. People forget we also have a significant number of crew on board, so there's a basic practice, and then the passengers, of course. So really you're a general practice plus a casualty department. We basically have all the facilities of a cottage hospital. There are things we can't carry out, but we can get a patient from A to B in a good condition, and then they can be referred ashore at the next port if there are suitable facilities for their treatment to be taken over. We have a small operating theatre, which we try not to use, don't like going in there, but it's also a treatment room as well, but it doubles up as an operating theatre.
What you do is you just need to pop the mask over your face.
As well as the dispensary, there is an intensive care unit, an isolation hospital, general wards, and to staff them, an assistant doctor and 4 nursing officers.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you feeling this morning?
And the most frequent complaints?
A lot of sunburn. So you have to be careful. We try to impress on the passengers to take care, so we warn passengers about sunburn. They also have an instance of seasickness, obviously. This can be treated quite easily, and we use an injection and tablets. So people often come and say, what about seasickness? And so obviously it does happen, we get into some heavy weather, but we can treat it, and the treatment's effective.
The time is 12 o'clock noon.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the officer of the watch. Since our departure from Piraeus until noon today, Canberra has steamed a total distance of 392 nautical miles. That is 392 nautical miles at an average speed of 22.5 knots.
The bridge is manned in 4-hour watches. In open sea, the steering is left to the autopilot. American military satellites provide accurate position checks, but Canberra is not dependent on them. Her course is plotted by men with charts. Satellites, nevertheless, are important, as John Pace, the Chief Electro-Technical Officer, explains.
Use satellites for communication, also satellites for navigation. The communication satellites allow us to get in touch with any country, any town, any village in the world. The navigation satellite is accurate to about 60 feet. It's taken away the sextant, which was the means of finding out the position you were in. The equipment we use needs a lot of skill to repair if anything goes wrong with it. But we're lucky in the fact that we've got backups for it for all navigational or communication equipment.
The radio room is the communications center. There you'll still hear Morse code, weather forecasts, as well as a few telegrams, and of course distress signals all come in by Morse.
Canberra Radio Office, how can I help you?
Most communications, though, are by telephone, fax and telex. The problem for Canberra transmitting in Morse these days is in finding receiving stations that can understand it, which is not something to trouble passengers calling home. They dial out on the satellite telephone.
Good afternoon, I'd like to make a call to London.
Certainly, what's the number you'd like to call?
041.
Just like a grand hotel, the ship has its own skilled pâtissiers. Besides satisfying the demands of afternoon tea and the dessert menu, every cruise has those occasions which can only be properly celebrated with a special cake.
Fourth engine, slow us down.
Four engine, slow us down.
Canberra berths at the northern Spanish port of Vigo. Passengers will go ashore on excursions, and the painters pick up where they left off in a job which has no end. In the Deputy Captain's office, the ship's committee meets. In the chair, Canberra's number 2, Nick Carlton.
We discuss any issues that have come up regarding the operation of the ship and any concerns of the crew. Really, the agenda is wide open, and then we follow it up, say, the next month, and see what progress has been made on specific issues.
Mail. Has there been any problems about receiving mail?
What in particular was discussed at today's meeting?
One of the things was the company's intention to introduce a new uniform for tradesmen working in the passenger accommodation, and it was discussed things like what sort of colour and the washing facilities, and just the practicalities of introducing something that other people may not have thought about.
New uniforms, even old ones, are not much on the minds of these people. They are crew members snatching some time off in their own part of the ship. This is the other Canberra, the one many passengers never imagine exists. It also answers the age-old question of where does the crew go when they're off duty? There are around 800 of them, and they have their own messes to relax in, a wardroom for the officers, and bar, although there are now strict international laws restricting the amount of alcohol any crew member may drink on board. The Indian crew have their own mess and a dining room specializing in Indian food. They are mostly Christians from Goa. Nearby, the customs of a different culture are observed to enter the Muslim Pakistani crew's quarters. The separation is mainly dictated by the dietary requirements of the two religions. The Pakistanis have their own kitchen too. In the very bottom of the ship is the engine room. Canberra is a steamship. Her boilers burn oil at more than 2,000 degrees centigrade. In hot climates, the temperature in the engine room is well over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The steam passes through turbines which drive alternators. These generate electricity to power the ship's engines. So ultimately, Canberra is propelled by two mighty electric motors. Together, they can produce just over 77,000 horsepower to drive the two propeller shafts. Her fuel consumption, about 53 feet per gallon of oil. Canberra's design was quite revolutionary in her day. Her engines were placed in the stern to free areas amidships for public rooms and cabins. It also meant much shorter pipe runs, important when they are carrying high-pressure superheated steam. But are there any advantages to steam? John Englefield.
People always say steamships don't vibrate as much, they're smoother running. But the heavy fuel costs outweigh the maintenance costs. The efficiency of the plant has been well superseded by that of diesels. Canberra burns on average about 250 tonnes a day. This obviously with speed increases to about 300 a day, and in port about 120 tonnes a day.
The other ingredient for making steam is water. Where does that come from?
We manufacture all our own. We have 3 evaporator plants on board. We have a total capacity of approximately 1,200 tonnes. We actually use in the engine about 200 tonnes a day, and the passengers and the ship services use a further 600 tonnes a day. Because we have boilers that require very high quality water, the whole plant is designed to make very high quality water. So we're actually, all the water on board is pure distilled water. We're talking about the maximum of about 4 parts per million of any impurities in it. That's why you get this lovely soapy effect when you go into a shower or a bath on the ship. We do get called out from time to time from passengers. You know, they may have lost a gold ring down the sink. We go and retrieve those for them. Sometimes they lose the false teeth, and those go through the food disposers, and I'm afraid we don't pick those up again.
Besides the electricity needed to drive the ship, Canberra also has her own power station to produce electricity for her domestic use. Her population may only be a little over 2,000, but the extra demands of her ventilation and air conditioning plant means the power she generates would serve a town of nearer 10,000 people. Put another way, you could easily run 9 million electric kettles off Canberra's supply. When the ship enters or leaves port, there are few more tense places on board than the engine room control console, as commands are rung down from the bridge. How responsive is Canberra to these controls?
Normally speaking, it takes about a minute to make a movement, but to actually bring the ship to stop from any speed, normally about 5 minutes before we've started to actually slow the engines down. They don't react very quickly. The advantage of Canberra's engines is that they go very high stern power. Therefore, once we get to it, we can pull ourselves back quicker.
And the man who actually drives the ship, how does he find she handles?
Well, Canberra is a ship the likes of which I don't think we will see again. She is a delightful lady, but she has, at times, a will of her own. She is a heavy ship, which is extremely good when you're in the open ocean, and that's what makes her such a good seagoing ship. A modern ship is much more responsive. Canberra is a ship that you have to think at least 100% further ahead than you would on a more modern ship.
The first sitting for dinner is approaching, and the galley begins the build-up to a second crescendo of activity in the day. With 4 or 5 choices of main course a night, the variety of food produced is almost as impressive as the volume. There is no risk of running out. Enough stores are always carried for the current cruise and the next. But how difficult is catering at sea compared, say, to a hotel? Chef Phelim McGuinness.
Well, when you're on board ship, you have your customer for the whole length of the cruise. That includes your breakfast, lunch, dinner, and buffets. Every meal which they eat is eaten on board. Our average cruise will be catering for 1,650 passengers plus 800 crew, and the consumption during a normal day would be in the region of around 10 tons. The bulk of our stores, dry stores, fresh fruit and vegetables, and all your beverages would be mainly stored in Southampton. But then during a cruise, we would pick up local fish like sardines, squid, and on this cruise in Haifa, St. Peter's fish. Also local fresh fruit and vegetables. And at this time of the year, we would pick up early season potatoes in Spain. We work the galley in the same way as we would work a hotel kitchen ashore. It's a very high pressure area. We have to get our product out on time. You know, we have breakfast, lunch, lunch buffets, special parties at times, dinner. So everybody has to be cool, calm, and a lot of stamina. Because on board ship, we are working 7 days a week. We don't get days off. Apart from your biscuits, which are used for cabin service, which are bought in, but the rest is all produced on board Canberra. All your bread, all your bread rolls, all your Danish pastries, your afternoon teas, all your after-dinner petit fours, mints, etc. Everything is produced on board ship. Being at sea, you just can't rush out to the local store and replenish your stock. So we have to plan carefully all the year round.
With so many people living in a relatively confined space and nearly everyone eating from the same kitchen, hygiene standards are critical. Any infection could spread very quickly. The captain makes his own inspection of the galley area, starting in the butcher's shop. Hygiene has such high priority that its maintenance comes under the direct responsibility of the deputy captain.
We're serving up to 8,000 meals a day in the ship, and everyone is living very close together, so it's extremely important that the ship is maintained to very high standards.
Good morning. Good morning, Captain.
Precautions are extensive. The captain's hygiene rounds are thorough in themselves. But they are by no means the only regular check carried out.
Once a week we have formal rounds conducted by the heads of department into all the various catering areas. That's supplemented by inspections when we get to Southampton by Southampton Port Health, and when the ship's in the United States, we're inspected by the United States Public Health, which run a very strict system, and it's on a point system where you have to maintain 85% to pass.
Mr. and Mrs.
join, sir, and come to Gemma.
And how is Gemma this evening?
Fine, thank you.
The ship changes for dinner and the captain's cocktail party, though not every evening is as formal as this.
Hello, Hilary. Delighted you could join us.
The galley has served the smoked salmon and is moving on to the soup.
Is that sherry?
Yes.
First sitting steaks are done to a turn.
And your name is?
James.
From?
From County Armstrong.
Just down a bit so I can see your face. Hi, lovely.
Right, now, are you having fun?
Oh, great.
Even though it's on quite late at night, you get a very good attendance at it.
Did you go and tour in Hyper?
You're going to be better next time. Good. Glad to hear that.
It's always a hectic day, isn't it? The only thing is you're so far away from the shop.
Thank you for coming along. Hope you enjoy it.
You will. We have every intention of doing so.
With dinner over, it's take your seats for the first show. Backstage, the company, all professional entertainers engaged back in Britain, look almost as tense as an engineer about to go full speed astern. Here, though, they have a different way of relieving their nerves. In the meantime, the galley has gone back to square one to serve dinner at the second sitting. Fish, consomme and vegetable soup are all dished up and whisked to the tables in 2 restaurants. The troupe of waiters is almost as well drilled as the chorus line in their opening number of the first show.
Suddenly jump or leap into the air. Try dancing, try dancing. Dancing's a better bet. You'll never ever get a better way to get from here to there.
In the photographer's shop, they are preparing glossy memories of a glittering evening which will be committed to the posterity of 1,000 albums. That's me and the captain, you know.
Some gorgeous feelings.
The captain himself, Rory Smith, has his own thoughts about the remarkable ship he commands and all who sail in her.
Canberra is the end result of a long line of ships and cruising and expertise. For 150 years we have been cruising. The crew that we have on board now, in many cases, are 6th generation of the people who initially started in this company. We have a tremendous depth of expertise. We have a loyalty and a family feeling. In some cases, we have fathers and sons on board now who've been with the company for years. They have the expertise, particularly for dealing with the British passenger. Canberra is a British ship, unashamedly so, and we cater for the British.